Angie Buys. I'm just welcoming you back from the break. For session 4 here, we have a PLC style breakout for a half hour about teaching online math, and it is going to be facilitated by Sandra Brigance from FSU. So I am going to go ahead and turn things over to Sandra, and we will begin.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. Make sure I'm on here. I'm not really sure. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm not sure what's going on.
Yes, we can hear you. And people can also use that reaction button on the bottom to do, if you click that reaction button in your menu bar, so you can give her like a thumbs up if she asks questions. So then, you know, she knows that you heard her, or people can type in the chat. Yeah, the virtual world is definitely a little different for this kind of communication.
Yes, I'm still getting used to it. And I apologize for not having a webcam right now. Mine broke and I haven't gotten a new one yet. So it's coming in Amazon soon. But I'll introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Sandra Brigance. I am a math professor at Ferris State University. And I actually have my doctorate in instructional design of online learning. And I've been doing a lot of different I teach math, I teach face-to-face, I teach mixed delivery, and I teach online. And I'm here to facilitate this professional learning community about teaching math online. So to kind of get the discussion going with questions and things. The first thing I would say, and I even have, let's see. I have a little graphic I'm going to show you just for fun. Here we go. All right. So I just wanted to put this up because this is just, I'm facilitating this discussion. And so I want to hear your questions, what you have to think about. But as I was thinking about facilitating this discussion, I went on Reddit and did a search and looked for what are students saying about their courses that went online? What are college students saying about their courses that went online? And the three main things that I pulled out of it were, one thing I saw a lot of, and I liked the way one person specifically said it, was without the accountability of class meetings, I feel like I'm being set up for failure. And I've heard that from students, from my own students, saying that when they don't have the class meeting to go to, they kind of lose track of their organizational skills, what has to be done at a certain time. They don't feel that same accountability. So you need to make sure that in anything that you do online, you're putting that accountability in, that you're meeting with them, that you're making sure they know that you're there and that you know they're there and actually interacting with them. Another thing I saw was, unfortunately, a lot of times you go into an online course, and I've seen this too, and you have reading assignments and videos to watch. Sometimes the videos aren't even made by the professor. You might be linking other videos. Oh, well, Khan Academy has great math videos. Let's just have them do that. But then the students are wondering, what is my professor doing to teach me if I'm just looking at all these videos and watching, reading all these things? What am I paying for? And then the third one that I kind of saw that stuck out to me was, is anyone else here? I'm lost and don't know what to do. And the biggest problem with that group is those students don't always reach out. You'd think the first thing you should do is email your instructor, contact your instructor, but they don't do that. A lot of times they're not, they just aren't sure how to reach out. They aren't sure what to do. And it's really easy in an online course to just disappear, to just kind of, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'll just log in again next week and maybe I'll figure it out or whatever. And so that's why you really need to make sure, the biggest thing I think is that you need to engage your students in learning math. And so you should be thinking about what you do in face-to-face that works and how could you do that online. And so I just kind of wanted to start with that little graphic to get things rolling here. And I think people can use the chat for questions, or raise their hands and stuff for things that you want to talk about. But I think the biggest thing to think about is what you do that works in face-to-face. How do you move that online? Don't think about, oh, there's all these great technologies I can use. Think about what you do that works, and then find the technology that'll help you do that online. And you have to engage your students. If you're just putting assignment videos for them to watch and then they do their practice work and then they turn in their work, that's not distance learning, that's correspondence courses. You need to engage them in discussions. A lot of people doing math courses aren't sure, how do I get students, do I need to do a discussion board? I would say always. You always need a discussion board for students to ask questions, but you can also gear them towards what they really need to know. One of the things that I try to use, I make my own videos for the material, and it's important to use short videos, so I break them into chunks, but I embed quiz questions in them. And I've had students tell me since I started doing that, that it helps them stay focused while they're watching the video, and it helps them think about what they should be taking notes on and what they should be focusing on if you're asking questions, just like you would in class, because in an in-class lecture, you would, ask questions as you go. So that's kind of how I want to kick this off, is getting some ideas in your head. And what kind of ideas do you have? What kind of things do you want to talk about?
Hi, my name's Kaylee. I help to run a summer program that focuses on math and reading. One of the big things, even though I don't teach math, the big thing that I'm getting questions on from our team is, how do I do math assessments? And how do I supervise it? How do we make sure that there's no cheating? Like, what are some of the best practices on facilitating math assessment in an online course?
That is a good one. A lot of people are always talking about math assessments and how do I know that they're not cheating on the test and that kind of thing. And you can always use, there are proctoring softwares out there. You can use lockdown browsers and proctoring monitors and things like that for proctoring exams. But I would suggest doing things more authentic assessments, thinking about alternative assessments requiring students show work. So let's see. Yeah, David McClendon just said that he likes to have students in a face-to-face class work alone or in groups on problems and walk around the room, and so that he can hear what they're saying. And so there's a couple of options here. One, it's really hard to emulate that in asynchronous environment. So if you can do synchronous class sessions, that is going to be ideal. Now, I don't know how many of you were in the last session when a few people brought up some questions about, well, a lot of people won't attend the synchronous online sessions, and that's true. Your attendance does tend to be low in those. But that synchronous online sessions are using Zoom like this are one way to kind of have students interact in real time. But there are things you can do in asynchronous environments too. And it's a little trickier because you have to realize that it's not in real time. So if you're using, say, a discussion board where you want students to, I had students try to do an activity through a discussion board. So they had to come in and respond to the initial prompt, which was starting this problem. And then they actually had to work through it and talk to each other about it. I had them in small groups in their discussion boards doing that. And I would keep interjecting with things, but you had to spread it over time. So it's hard to get that, what you would do in, say, a 1-hour classroom setting. You have to realize you're going to have to spread it over time if you're doing it in a discussion board, an asynchronous discussion board. So you want to make sure that students are aware that they need to come back to the discussion board after they post their first reaction or their first attempt at a problem, so that they can start discussing it. Trying to use small groups inside the discussion boards can help with that. what are some things some other people have tried? And the other thing I would say, just kind of on the assessment things, make students show their work, because that's one way to kind of combat cheating, is if students are showing their work. And that's another thing you can do in the, it's a little harder to do in the synchronous Zoom meeting if you have like a class full of students, to have each one showing them what they're doing. But if you use small breakout Zoom meetings with small groups, then you can have students show their work on their camera of what they're trying. When you're using discussion boards, you can have students take pictures of their work and show what they're thinking and what they're trying. So that's another option there.
Something that I tried this last semester is that we use WebAssign. And so they had these WebAssign assignments, and we just called them WAQs because they were WebAssign quizzes. And so everyone got their own little set of problems, but like you said, they had to show their work. So I provided a template, and I could even ask questions that went beyond what WebAssign was asking. That was more like how I do business when I teach class. And it was interesting because, again, now they can't cheat. They have to show the work. And what really got their attention is that you might get points back if you had work and you maybe made a typo mistake, or you would get points taken away for not having the correct work. And it definitely got their attention, which was really nice.
Yeah, I think showing the work is one of the best things to do for assessments, because you can always, like I said, you can always do proctoring, but some people feel very uncomfortable being, you know, the webcam proctoring, like ProctorU and those kind of things. We have the Respondus monitor that here at Ferris. And I can understand some people, like if you feel like you need to have a proctored exam, then you can use those tools. But there can be problems with them, and some that they can add anxiety for a lot of students also, that they're on camera while taking the exam the entire time. So if you can avoid that, if possible, by having them show their work, you can still do timed exams. You can still use tools like Lockdown Browser and things like that, but having them show their work, or thinking of trying to do, like you were saying, where they had different problems. If you can use a system where they're actually going to have different problems, so it's not like they can just copy off of each other, that's another way to avoid cheating. I would also say that I like to see their work, because one of the things I tell my students in all my math classes, well, sure, when you're doing a math problem in the real world, you want to make sure you got the right answer. But when I'm trying to teach you how to do math, and you're trying to learn how to do math, I want to know you know the right process so that you can do it again. And so showing work is the best way to have that happen. So I would say definitely having them show their work on an exam, or even on any homework or anything that you can, and not on all homework. You can use the homework assists like WebAssign, Alex, My Math Lab for practice. Those are great for skills practice, but when you want to build in your own questions and have them show their work, that can help you see, are they really getting the processes? And I think that's important.
So mainly you are using the test option in Canvas, and then having students take photos of a sheet of paper of how they've done their work and send that into you.
Yeah. My students just take pictures with their phone of the actual problem, you know, their work that they did, and post it. If you use, we're using Canvas, and if you use Canvas, you can have the questions where they can attach the photo or post the photo there. Or some faculty will just have them email it. I find emailing is a little difficult. I prefer to have it right in the test. So I use the Canvas quiz maker where they can, each question allows them to embed a photo of their work. And then I would also consider, you should always consider, if possible, doing different types of assessments like alternatives, authentic assessments, project-based assessments. I did a survey of calculus class fully online, and they had to, their final project, instead of their final exam, was to actually, because it's a survey of calculus, my goal was to have them be able to apply calculus to a real world scenario. So they had to make a video where they actually came up with their own calculus problems, and we worked on them for weeks. I helped them. They kept posting and working with me. But they had to come up with their own calculus problems, and then differentiation and integration. They had to have at least one of each for an actual scenario. And they had to present on video how they solved what their problem was and how they solved it using calculus. And to me, that was a better type of final exam for them, because it really showed the main point of the course, which was that they can see the value and be able to apply calculus to real situations. And yeah, some people are talking about some of the apps like PhotoMath, where they can take a picture of the problem. And there are things, that's one of the reasons why I say trying to think of alternative assessments, because if you go to Symbolab, for example, I think it is, and you type in an algebra problem, you can click a button that says show me step by step, and it'll show the answers, show you step by step how to do the problem. And that's a great tool for students to use to learn math, but it's not something you want them using while you're assessing whether they understand it. So again, I would try to come up with alternative assessments. Exams aren't the only ways to assess if a student's understanding things, so that's something to think about. Lee also said that I had my students use Cam Scanner. Yeah, Cam Scanner is a good one. They can just, they can make a PDF file directly, and then they can attach that. And again, I tend to prefer that they attach it in the Canvas thing so I can see it right in the exam. But if you need to have them email, that's okay too. What are some other things that some of you are trying to think about, how you would translate something you like doing in face-to-face classes, how you would do it in a online setting, or just questions about things that you know you're going to need to change to online and need some help with?
Yes, I would like to know a little bit more about working with teams in an online environment. I've been using breakout rooms, but I'm wondering if there's other options I could be looking at.
Breakout rooms are good. You can also do group discussion boards where you assign them only to groups, or group assignments where they can do that. There's a lot of like Google Docs apps that you can use for them to work together. Some of the issues about having students work together in an online setting is, well, similar to some of the issues with having them work together in a face-to-face setting, which is making sure that all the group members are actually contributing. And so that's where, if you're using some of the tools in Canvas, if you're using the group discussion boards, you can actually facilitate it and monitor it and see that they're all participating, or you're having them use the breakouts or the Google breakout things that are connected. Then you can actually kind of facilitate it, check in on them. I did that with some of my students who were working on their final projects in groups. I said, well, why don't you create a group thing, and then I could look at what you guys are doing and help you out with it. So that's a good way to get people involved. I'm not as familiar with a lot of group tools, but I know that some of the main things that you need to think about are the same things you would think about in face-to-face. What if not everyone is contributing? What can you do to help them? So maybe having some breakout sessions with the different groups. And then there were some questions about duplicating a whiteboard online. So we have online whiteboards that you could see work in real time. Whiteboard.fi is a good one. I know that a lot of my students work on mobile, and you have to be aware of that they're only using their phone or a tablet device. And so sometimes when you're thinking about different tools, you want to make sure that they're able to use those. But which is why I said a lot of my students will just take a picture of their work. But as far as if you want to see them working step by step, the whiteboard online is good. I think that some of the things that people don't think about when they're trying to switch to online, because one of the things that comes up very quickly is, okay, what do I do about tests? But some of the other things you need to think about is the learning that's taking place. And don't forget about the formative assessment things that you do in the classroom. So like David mentioned, you like to walk around and have see what students are saying, give them guidance as necessary. That is difficult to replicate in an online environment. So if you can do small group meetings through Zoom, where you have them work in small groups, instead of trying to have the whole class together, schedule different groups for different times or different days, and then you can facilitate that and you can allow them to work together and you can interject in that way.
Sandra, I think you touched on it a little bit, but as far as, teaching math online, how does that relate to students with the math anxiety? Because I know that's a really big thing that people seem to be very comfortable saying, oh, they can't do it because of math anxiety, even though in other subjects we assume it's not quite the same anxiety level, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, but particularly in math, that is definitely a term, a concept that people discuss. How does that play out in your experience in math, or to others who might have experience with that?
Well, for me, I've actually had students who mentioned that they like some of the things that can lower, and I used to do this in face-to-face classes, some of the things that can lower some of that math anxiety is giving them that option to view the content over and over again. So I make my own math videos and I embed little quiz questions in them to keep them focused and things like that. But I think that's kind of one of the things that you can do by having these videos that they can watch over and over again. That actually can help students, whether they're face-to-face or mixed delivery or fully online, with some of their anxiety, because a lot of it can be linked to not catching everything the first time. When a student's in a classroom, students don't always take very good notes. I've looked at some of the notes my students have taken in the classroom after a math lecture, and it's surprising the things that they write down and the things that they don't, that they should have written down. So I think by having the questions embedded in a video can guide you, using the discussion board to guide. I think like I mentioned, having a camera on them for proctoring an exam tends to up that anxiety level. Having a timed exam tends to up that anxiety level. And I understand the need for that sometimes. And I do use proctoring and timed exams sometimes when there's skill-based things that I need to make sure, or specific concepts or definitions I need to make sure they understand. But I try to do alternatives and allowing students to work on projects where they have more time to think about the concepts, more of a project-based learning, tends to help with some of that math anxiety, I think. And making sure that they know, I think this is the same in every course though, making sure that they know every week what's happening. So I always try to start the week by sending out a announcement about what's going on this week. It helps to have a little video in the module. We're explaining, okay, here's what we're doing this week or this unit, here's what we're starting with. And that's good for every kind of class. Because I think math anxiety is one thing, but now we're adding online learning anxiety. So we're kind of compounding the problem. And I think we've got that going on with all of our students. And so I think it's really important to make sure that you touch base with them, that you're contacting students. If you have a student that you're not hearing from, then try to reach out to them and find out, you know, if they need help with something, if they're confused on something, what exactly the issue might be so that you can help them. Make sure you're reachable and that they know that they can talk to you. So I always do I use the scheduler in Canvas for online office hours, and I get more students in my online office hours than I was getting in face-to-face office hours. So I think that's working pretty well. What about others? What are some of you doing to help with math anxiety compounded by online learning anxiety?
I'm wondering how many people have played with the whiteboard in Zoom. Has anyone had time to play with sharing the whiteboard in Zoom?
I haven't. I've been curious about that one. I was going to try that one myself. Is anyone else?
I have.
I found it's kind of weird. Yeah.
It has limitations, in my opinion, but I have used it to put up notes, and also I have a Service Pro, so I'm doing I'll write on my on my screen using the pen, and it seems to work pretty well as long as you remember not to have straight lines and have to have curved lines. A technical issue.
Yeah, I've used it for Teams sharing in their breakout rooms, but it's limited in that the person sharing, one person can share the whiteboard and they have access to all the tools, and then the other, you can give access to everyone else, but they can't see the tools, so they have no idea what they're doing with it. So it's a little bit limited in that way. But if you wanted to use it for just like one person documenting a group or drawing someone's ideas, it seems like it could be a good use.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience. I haven't tried it in a while because I do not teach math. And I was wondering if maybe either it had evolved or if there were just some skills that I had missed on it. Epic Pen is a really nice annotation tool that has been shared with us. And again, I don't have a lot of experience with it, but for drawing on the screen where you can, share some of your pre-done questions or your math questions and then annotate it over with Epic Pen is a fun one. But again, I think that one is still, it's the individual user and not the group shared document type thing, as far as, like a whiteboard where they would be able to use it in a group.
Yeah, I found that because I tend to use, I have a tablet that I can write on. So I use that when I'm showing and describing things to students. But I found most of my students are using their webcams and writing on paper. And so they'll just hold up their paper with whatever they tried or those kind of things. A lot of them aren't really gravitating towards the tech online because it's just easier for them and they're more used to using a piece of paper in front of them. So I just tell them, you know, have your webcam so that you can point it at your paper and we can talk about what you're working on and work through it. That's typically how online office hours go for me.
Is there anybody who prefers using the online tools for writing as opposed to doing math with, you know, pencil, pens, and paper, whether it's on a whiteboard or even just on your personal? I'm just kind of curious if there's anyone who has truly embraced some of the mathematical tools when you're working math problems, not counting things like, you know, performing statistical tests and things like that, but when you're actually doing calculations. Is there anyone who prefers the electronic tools available?
Based on the silence, I'm kind of guessing not.
Well, Tracy, I'll tell you, no. It's flat out no.
I find it my students find it difficult in the discussion boards to express their math if they can't upload a picture. So now our discussion boards are just full of pictures. They all just post what they wrote by hand. It's just a lot easier for students and I think for anyone to kind of do their math problem on a piece of paper and pencil.
Yeah, and going along with that and what Lee said, yeah, I can't, and I enjoy math. I don't teach it, but I enjoy it. I cannot imagine. It is a different feeling to have to figure out how to put it in technology, even when I'm on technology a lot, and then especially when you're adding in, you know, having to type pluses and minuses and finding all the different things in parentheses and then multiple levels of parentheses and superscript and subscript. And it's like, whoa. And you take a pencil and it's great. You just write it out. And even things like on graph paper to make sure that the lines, you know, stay organized. To me, it's so much easier. So I just wondered if it was just because I'm not a math person, but it sounds like maybe there's something in just the feel of doing math. One question as far as thinking through the challenge, because I know, you know, up to 10 years ago, I was asked when I was an instructional designer just starting out at Northwestern Michigan College about strategies to teach math online. And our math department, people were saying, oh, the math teachers won't use math tools. Isn't there something you can help them with? And 10 years ago, I did kind of a tool review and I came up with no, not really. Because that was before the cell phones were so easy as far as being able to upload and download pictures and things. It really was a challenge that didn't make sense to put new to math people, you know, learning a symbolic language with another symbolic language in a technological format. That was just overwhelmed. But I wonder, as far as managing the homework, if anyone has done things with like portfolio type collections where students collected in a portfolio, or, you know, if you have a Google slide presentation or a PowerPoint presentation where they could take a series of pictures and then that way they can put it into the, you know, just insert the images into a PowerPoint slide presentation. So maybe 10 slides for 10 major problems or something as a management tool. Has anyone had any kind of experience with that? Or is that something that doesn't even, you know, doesn't help?
Well, in two of my courses I teach, I have projects, and I'm not a math teacher, but in my projects, our students go in and use a software called Bluebeam. It's a construction documentation software, and they get it for free, and that's one of the nice things. And then they create their report all in PDF files, and each PDF, each page that they're bringing in is either a screen capture, a printout to PDF, or again, I use Cam Scanner so they can upload the work and show it behind. For example, one of my classes is estimating, so they have an Excel spreadsheet that they'll print out, but then behind that it has to be their handwork, and it is a challenge to then have them take pictures of maybe 15 or 20 sheets of backup work, and I have them doing 3 different bids, so that's like 60, 70 pages. That gets to be a little bit time consuming, whereas in face-to-face, that would be a notebook that they would be handing in to me, just paper. I mean, so a little different, but takes a lot longer to go through and review the PDFs than it does to review the paper, though. That's what I've found.
I would agree with that. I do a lot of project-based learning, and they do have, so they're uploading pictures and PDF files, and it does take a lot more time than what you could do. Well, for one thing, what you could do in the classroom, just, you know, quick formative type assessment, but also then looking through a notebook, you'd think, well, it's the same content, but going through the PDFs and stuff, not necessarily the same. I did find using the audio comments worked really well for me for giving feedback on those types of things. So when they have a project file that's particularly long and I have a lot to go through, I use the audio comments and I found that to be easier and save a little time.
I think that's a really good point you bring up, Lee, about the number of pages and the inconvenience even when you have the phone to take that, because I think there are a lot of courses that fall into that larger, you know, project level where you want them doing that. You don't want them working in small itty bitty disconnected chunks. And that management piece, I don't know if anyone here has tried it, but Rocketbook, it's a notebook and then you can wipe off the pages, but one of the parts you write on it with a special pen, and the way it does the picture, it will automatically send it. It still involves taking a picture, but it sends the notes directly to pre-specified files if you organize it ahead of time. So that might be one thing that could be helpful. And I think they come in graph paper, regular paper. I don't think they come in like blueprint paper. And then another strategy, if you are in an area like construction where your students might need to be doing that a lot and not just in your class, I do know some instructors with the cheap printer scanners that they have now, you know, the $50 and less, you can put things through the scanner. And so as long as they just do their work on a regular sheet of 8.5 by 11, they can put it, you know, right through that cheap printer and it'll create a scan and send it to their email. And that might be another way to just help minimize some of that level of annoyance, really, in dealing with the technology barrier.
I'm also not sure of the specific app, but I know that some of my students used on iPads, they were able to write directly on their iPads to do their work, so they could open the problems up, work right on their iPads to do the work, and it also they could save the picture and directly upload it to Canvas for a discussion board or something like that, but it also would save them in files for them so that if they had multiple pages, it would put it together for them and submit it. And so some of the easiest ones to look at for me were the ones that were using this iPad app. I don't know the name of the actual app off the top of my head, but it allowed them to do the same kind of thing. They could write right on it and then it compiled their pages for them.
I think EduCreations is one, and Explain Everything is another one that I've known math teachers and science teachers. Yeah. Dave McClendon just put another one, PDF Expert.
Yeah, I actually had some, I had a course this past semester where they had some applications that were PDF based, and so they'd have a PDF that had like a graph that they had to do something with, and they could open it right on their iPad and write on it directly, and that worked really well.
So Sandra, I have a question about when you're organizing your online course. What do you require? Because now we're talking about an iPad. Some just use phones, some have laptops, some just have computers. What do you require them to have in order to be successful in your class?
Well, yeah, I don't want to require them to have a specific tool or whatever, which is why I try to give them options for how they can show their work. So if they have an iPad, I tell them, you know, what kind of things they can do with that. Most of them have a phone that they could take a picture of their work at the very least. So I do allow that. I try not to, if I have a fully online course and I am going to do proctored exams, then I'll say you have to have a webcam. I also put on my office hours that I prefer that they have a webcam. And they often use that to show me their work, or they use the camera on their phone to do so. Like I said, I try not to require a specific tool. So I try to make it open enough that they can use whatever tool they have available. But I would say that generally a webcam is helpful, because like for my office hours, my students don't typically have the webcam pointed at them. They have it pointed at the piece of paper that they're working on. And so I'll have them start working out the problem, and that way I can watch them see and catch them with what they're making mistakes on and stuff. But so I do usually say some kind of webcam, but then they can also use their phone for that. They can use the video thing on their phone as that. I try not to require something like that they have specifically. I would never say everybody in my class needs an iPad, for example. So I think making options available to recognize that students have different technology to work with.
I don't remember who just mentioned the dot cam, but it made me think of the dot cam, and I went to do a little search because the other day one of the faculty at Kendall College of Design was talking about how many of the faculty got some different portable ones that are about $100 or less. So I did a little search, and not only did a number of those came up, I completely forgot that there are portable scanners that you can buy also that act just like a wand. And it's the ones that I saw were about $65, and then you just wand it over the paper and it turns it into the PDF. So you're not using your phone and all your phone data. You know, again, I like whoever it was that said they try not to tell the students what technology to use and let them decide, because I think, you know, different people, depending on where they're actually working, what type of work environment, their desk and things like that, might choose different things. But it's good to know that for $100 or less, if they have to do it, they can get a, you know, USB plug-in dot camera that will already be right over their hand, hold their iPhone, hold their whatever phone, or portable scanners.
Jacob asked about picture submissions on assignments, and from a lot of instructors I've talked to, a lot require PDFs, but most of, I don't require PDFs, and most of my students do not submit PDFs. They submit picture files or image files, whatever their phone file saves it as. It'll show up in Canvas for me. So I've been pretty open to whatever file types they can use. One of the problems, and this is a problem that I will say with Canvas that I brought up last semester and has not been resolved, but one of the problems is in discussion boards. I like to use discussion boards to have students actually discuss math problems. And in order to do that, they need to post pictures. And I feel that it's a bit against netiquette and kind of rude to require people to open attachments to see what you're asking a question about or what your work is. So I want them to post the pictures directly in the discussion window. But when they take a picture from their phone, the file size can be quite large because it's doing like a photograph, like you're taking a scenery picture or something, which you don't really need for a math problem, but that's what it's doing. And so the file size can be large, and they can have problems uploading them in the discussion window. But the biggest problem that has occurred in my classes is their file size gets full from pictures they upload in the discussion windows. So they end up getting told about a month into the semester that they can't upload any more pictures into discussion windows. And so that's been a problem for my classes, because that's the main thing that I want to see. I want to see their handwritten work, and I want them to be able to easily just snap a picture with their phone and throw it in the discussion board. And I can do it because I have unlimited file size, but they can't. And so that tends to be a problem in my classes. Oh, do we have a tool here? Tom says Genius Scan app will solve this. I'll have to look into that.
It's what I've been told, although I haven't actually used it myself. They're raving about it at Tech ever since everybody got thrown online. The director for our Center for Teaching and Learning is a huge proponent of it and suggesting it to everybody that is in the situation you're talking about. Turned it into a lower file size PDF and does a lot of kind of picture correction too.
Does it turn it into PDFs though?
I think that's what he said it did, yeah.
Okay, PDFs don't post in discussion board windows though. Only images.
Ah.
That's one of the problems I've had with, because if student tries to post a PDF, it'll just attach it and then you have to download it to open it. You need it to be a picture file to actually show in the discussion board window.
And those are big usually.
Yeah.
I mean, I know at Ferris, as well as when I was at NMC and at GVSU, most institutions do have some type of repository where you can request for that extra space for the picture storage. But in my mind, that's still not very user-friendly. So if you're teaching, you know, a more intro level math or something where the students aren't absolutely in love with taking all the steps that they have to take to figure out a different login and a place to host, that's not necessarily the best solution. So I don't know if anyone has a different solution, because that is a very valid concern with the file size. And I don't anticipate that going away very well.
Yeah, I had mine increased before for my students for one of my courses, but then within a month it was full up again. It really just, so it wasn't working too well. What I ended up resorting to in my class just as a workaround was, I told my students, you should always try to post it in the window, but also attach it. And when they use the attach thing, I end up opening it, editing their post, and posting it for them. So I spend a lot of my time reposting their pictures now in the discussion board, or at least I did for the second half of the semester. So that's not a good fix. But it's the only thing that I could do to make sure that the pictures were there for all the students to see without having to download them.
I have a weird workaround that, based on what Alexandra shared about the photos being put into Google Drive. And again, this is one of those convoluted ones that seems to be very typical of teaching math online sometimes, where it's just not quite as straightforward as we might like it. But if you create a Google slide from your perspective, so you create one Google slide deck, but set the editing right so that anybody with the link can edit, you can share the link to your class ahead of time. And the reason I say that, because in both Canvas and Blackboard, and actually all three, and Moodle, because I've done it in all three, rather than share the link to the Google Drive, if you use the embed code of the Google Drive document, the Google Slides, then students in real time, so you can be either in Zoom or you can be in your Canvas course or any other course, and as students upload pictures, they can insert the pictures into the Google slide deck, and then you would be able to see it in real time. But again, that's a little bit convoluted on the setup. When you're in the habit of doing it, it's simple, but it's one of those things to that you would have to think out, where does it make sense? Is it worth that effort?
Yeah, one of the things that my students loved at first about the mobile app for Canvas was that they could be in a discussion board. That I didn't try this, but this is what some of my students told me. They could be in a discussion board reading discussions and then ready to reply, and they wrote down some math thing that they wanted to take a picture of, and they are on their phone in the mobile app. They take the picture and it immediately goes into the discussion window, so everyone can they can upload it quite easily. And that worked fine until their file size became limited, till that was full. Then they couldn't do that anymore. Okay. But I liked that feature that they could just do that. They're in the discussion and, oh, look, I'm gonna hit images and it lets me take a picture right now of what I have. But like I said, it worked about partway through the semester, and then all their file sizes were full.
I can relate. I have long outgrown my iPhone storage and I just ignore it. But it is that time. A couple housekeeping things, and thank you, Sandra. That has been just a great discussion on math, and I highly appreciate you taking the chance of being willing to just host it for our first virtual symposium, and everyone else who has stayed and discussed and contributed. This is.
Can I mention one thing, Tracy?
Sure.
I just wanted to mention to everybody that I am teaching a course called Teaching Math Online in the fall. It's Math 698. It's a graduate level course. It's fully online for anyone who's interested. And I am going to start the course early this summer for consultations with people who are trying to set up their fall courses. So anyone who's interested in that should contact me.
Yeah. Awesome. That would be great. And I can tell you, from working with Sandra in a different venue, being faculty developer, working with her, she has a wealth of experience and ideas and has just done amazing things with the math classes that she has designed for online. If you have interest in being a part of a continuing professional learning community around topics related to math, whether it's math and mathematics class or math and construction or math in your project-based learning, if you would, in the chat, go ahead and put your name and just type your name and your email so that way we can capture it. And then when we start scheduling some options for connecting, throughout the summer and beyond, I'll know, who to reach out to. And on that, I want to turn it back over to Kelly Senkowski, who is going to go ahead and lead us through some additional closing details. But again, I am so excited that everybody came together and participated, and it's been just a really great day. So thank all of you, because it could not have happened without everybody just risking ambiguity.
Yes, thank you all for coming and for your patience whenever we had live glitches, because it's live. So thank you for that. Just next steps and looking ahead, I want to first thank all of our speakers and all of our session and breakout presenters. Thank you so much, because we definitely couldn't do it without you. Appreciate you. And the ones coming up tomorrow are being present in your online course and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of that, social presence, then online course layout and navigation, and creating a sustainable classroom ecosystem through participation interaction and strategies for inclusion in online classes. The format will be much the same, with the 15-minute breaks between the sessions and the hour-and-a-half lunch. And we just added an exciting thing that we had been talking through. So we have an invitation for you tomorrow. Afterwards, we have an after-hour social event, because if you go to a physical face-to-face conference, they usually always have a mingle time so everyone can network, meet other people that are in their areas, or have suggestions for future collaborations. So we're going to do that so everyone can bring their favorite beverage, whatever they want, come ready to chat. And we're just going to kind of have an open chat and see how that goes with everybody. They can pipe in, talk to people, do private messages to people, whatever they need to do. It's going to be on the main session link. And our last takeaway, we're trying to have a takeaway for you each evening. So if you haven't yet, on your agenda, click on your handouts link that's at the top of each day. And what you'll find in there, our first takeaway item is we have a how to survive social distancing or working at home online for college students. And I mentioned this earlier, I think in our first session actually, and it's actually a PDF that you can put in your classes, hand them to them. It was actually designed by a graduate level class at KCAD under the business program for Ferris. There's this one there for college students, but there's also one here for faculty and staff for yourself. If you need a reminder of how to stay healthy, I'm a bad example because I can sit all day here and forget to eat. So you know what, just take care of yourself too. And so can Tracy. So we need to do a little bit better at following this routine. But so there's just some really nice PDFs. There are plenty of helpful tips out there, but these two handouts actually talk about the mental, emotional, and physical well-being instead of just one of them or two of them. So with that, I say thank you for joining us and have a good rest of your day.